Hi, everyone. Welcome to RbD's Workout Wednesdays, a weekly show designed to deliver bite-sized training sessions that equip and empower you with practical tools to unlock and unblock your path to success. Our show features industry experts from our other weekly show, Rev Shots. We're showcasing real-world tactics and strategies that work. Tune in to make your numbers, retain your team, and delight your customers. Follow me on LinkedIn or join our mailing list to stay updated on our latest speakers and episodes. Let's move forward together, one Wednesday at a time. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Workout Wednesday. We are on episode 20, believe it or not. And as I know, right, Pete? So episode 20, and Pete and I were just talking before we kicked off. I'm a firm believer as adults, we would most likely fail kindergarten because we overthink just about everything, right? So this show is designed to give you practical and tactical nuggets of wisdom that you can use with your team, whether or not you engage with our presenters. It's really all about, as a leader, moving forward one step at a time at the end of the day. So that is how we achieve success. So Pete, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure to see you. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, and thank you. So everybody, Pete was on our show Friday on Rev Shots. That was episode number 69. And Workout Wednesday, you know, is the follow-on to that show where we're showcasing the platforms and the solutions that we talk about at the end of the day. So with that, let me give you a quick recap of what Pete and I talked about last Friday. And then Pete, let's dive in.
Please.
So yeah, if I recall correctly, Pete, we talked about, we always ask everybody the one question you're hearing right now, and it's always about pipeline, it's about coaching, it's about improvement. So give us a little bit of refresh, right, on what you're seeing and hearing, and then let's dive into having you show us Atrium and the problem that is solving.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most of my day-to-day talking with CROs and revenue operations leaders, and the things that are most top of mind for them, at least when they're talking with us, kind of unsurprisingly, is how to help their frontline managers and reps, drive more accountability, better performance management, things of this nature, generally across, a variety of initiatives. Different organizations have different initiatives that they really want to put attention on, but if you wanted to generalize things, right, things like driving accountability on AE self-sourcing and prospecting behavior, right?
Amen.
Because we know that account executives love to they love to prospect, not as much as they should, especially coming out of the last few years, as SDR ratios have compressed, and kind of inbound has dried up, or at least marketing spend has been kind of attenuated there. Those are that's something that's very top of mind for organizations. As though then they talk with us about okay, well, I'm going to implement a pipeline generation or an AE self-sourcing initiative. How do I actually make sure that it happens? How do I drive accountability on that, et cetera, et cetera? So that would be one example. There's obviously lots of examples that organizations work with us in order to drive accountability on, but that's a more general one that kind of shows up across the market.
Yeah. And, Pete, it's so funny. Well, one, thank you for sharing. And two, I love the fact that the conversations you're having are talking about full cycle accountability end to end, because I think it's really easy in some organizations. We have the bright, shiny new idea, and there's no operational excellence underneath it or after. Yeah. So it just warms my heart to hear the accountability cycle at the end of the day, right? So how do we make sure it's done? Which I think should give all leaders, managers, and directors the green light to talk about accountability with their teams.
Sure.
So, okay, so let's dive in. And given that example, and I love that's what you're hearing. And oh, by the way, AE's prospecting is not a new issue. It's been around for probably 15 years. So come on, everybody, if not long.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the way to think about what our software here at Atrium, what our customers use it for is they use it for sales performance management. It's specifically for measuring and managing the performance, the quantity and quality of selling behavior that reps are doing. It's primarily used by frontline managers and the reps themselves. mainly insofar as like more traditional analytics, like what we like to say, like walls of charts, like BI, things like that, typically end up being in the C-suite, second level leaders, et cetera, et cetera. Oftentimes, they can be exposed to kind of frontline and reps, but those folks typically struggle to consume those. You get kind of dashboard overload, et cetera, et cetera. And so what, to your point about keeping it simple, most of the time frontline managers and reps, they just need to understand, like, hey, these are the basic things that I need to make sure that my reps are doing. Are they doing a sufficient quantity of that, or are they doing a sufficient quality of that as well? And so Atrium helps those organizations do exactly that. So in this case, just kind of do a really basic demo here. We're logged in as a frontline manager here, who has 7 reps that are reporting into them. And so what Atrium in this case is doing, this is essentially a readout on their team. This is something that our managers have a tendency to use in their ahead of their team meetings. And essentially what this is doing is it's synthesizing exactly what's going on this team, right? So it's telling us the things that are good, the organization's doing it, the team's doing a good job multi-threading in their open opportunities, and they're doing it. It looks like they're doing a great job with respect to advancing pipeline along. Kind of like pipeline velocity, getting a bunch of pipe to discovery, getting a bunch of pipe to scoping, et cetera. When it comes to things that are like maybe not so good there, we can see that the team isn't where they need to be with respect to their AE self-sourced ops. And so what you might say here is you'd say, oh, okay, well, this is cool that this organization has this. Like, well, how does the system know that this is the case for them? Well, because these organizations that work with us, they tell the software what they care about. Right. So as an example, and they do that across kind of like, varying kind of buckets of metrics. So things like pipeline generation, which we were talking about earlier, things like activity, things like pipeline advancement, things like pipeline hygiene, or any sort of like kind of custom metrics that organizations care about. So as an example, this team right here they've set a number of, expectation, kind of like, I forget the phrase that you used for it, Dionne, but like, standards of excellence in the organization.
Standards of excellence. Yep.
Right. They said, like, hey, you know what? On this team, we have an expectation that you have 6 customer-facing meetings a week. On a monthly basis, we want you should be having 5 first meetings a month. We should be having 25 customer-facing meetings a month. And then like these are just kind of like basic things here. Also, we have a self-sourced prospecting initiative in place, and so these reps here have kind of named accounts that are assigned to them. And so they've set a goal saying, hey, in a given month, we want you to be able to be interacting with 5 of your tier 1 accounts that don't have an open op on them, right? Because if it has an open op on it, you're not prospecting it, right? You're just selling to it. And so what this is an example of a metric that is aligned to that initiative. And then there's an output metric associated with this as well. So like this is an input metric. Are you engaging with those accounts? And also are you multi-threading within those? Because those are leading indicators to then creating opportunities to come out of that. And this is the lagging indicator associated with that, which is, hey, we have an expectation that in a quarter, you should be self-sourcing 5 opportunities that then reach disco. So this is essentially what the organization has said matters to this team. And this is actually generalized across 4 other teams in this organization. And then you can kind of see there's like variability in that performance, right? Some of the reps are hitting those first meetings in the month goal. Some of them are crushing that, right? But other ones are like lagging far behind, as an example. And it calculates this in kind of in period there, like this was that was this month, this week, etc. It also shows us historical performance there as well, right? So you can see, generally speaking, that this team does a good job of hitting their first meetings on the month goal. This rep right here seems like he has activity issues in general, kind of across the board there. You can see that this rep does not right here. This rep is highly active. Everyone's doing a good job with respect to their multi-threading, etc. And so that's where the things that we care about come from, and then the AI then synthesizes that in order to tell us like what's happening across the team, which reps maybe we want to keep an eye on. So as an example, this rep right here, Fairy Mary, these are all Disney character names, is someone that we should maybe keep an eye on here. For these reasons here. And in fact, actually, this is another kind of primary use case that our customers use Atrium for, is in their one-on-ones. right?
Yep.
So this essentially is like a scouting report on the rep. Walking into my one-on-one, this rep right here, Fairy Mary, has the same goals that we were looking at previously across the team, directed at them here. So these are essentially the same goals on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis there. And then this is being synthesized here. So this rep is doing a great job with respect to their pipeline velocity. Love to see it, right? They're actually creating a bunch of pipeline, which is great. Looks like they are lagging when it comes to their self-sourced ops getting to disco. Looks like they are light when it comes to their another kind of like metric that was associated with that initiative of tier 1 self-sourcing processing thing. So you can see that the number of opportunities in their pipe that come from those tier 1 metric, or those tier 1 accounts, is much lower than all the other reps. And so this organization, like at their SKO, they were like, hey, we are doing this named account thing. It's very important for you to generate opportunity, not just you, but also your SDR that you're paired with, to generate opportunities out of these tier 1 accounts. Actually, it looks like you are light, right? And then what the manager does is they talk about that and they correct it, right? Because you're now aware of performance as compared to this thing that the organization said that they care about, right? This isn't just like made up. It's like, we did this whole thing. We aligned with marketing to make sure that we designated the accounts that mattered. We did all this enablement associated with it. We created all this content associated with it. We loaded it up in all the sales engagement tooling. We did all this role playing associated with it. And now we're going to see whether or not people are actually going to do it. And we're going to drive accountability on that, right? And so like that's the kind of the performance management loop that oftentimes is missing when you try to approximate this by handing people, large walls of charts, which they of course, proceed to just close the tab and hop on a call with the rep. The last thing I'll show you before I kind of shut up here is we also present this directly to the rep as well. So this is all about alignment, right?
Yes.
And so in this case, the goals that were present, right, that we're aligned with the organization, are set within the software. It presents them to the manager, presents them on the per rep basis to the manager as well. It's also available to the rep as well. So like this rep can see that they are where they need to be with respect to their activity this week, and they're doing a good job on their activity this month, but they're not where they need to be with respect to their prospecting. And then it's also synthesizing that as well. So it's saying, hey, you know what, you're doing a great job crushing on your pipeline advancement goals there. That's fantastic. Good job on the creating the pipeline. Looks like we're not where we need to be with respect to our prospecting multi-threading goal, right? Looks like we're not. And so you'll recall that this is essentially the same stuff that the software was talking about to the manager, but being talked to for the rep, right? So everyone's on the same page. We come to our one-on-one, right? Like there's no beating around the bush. We know exactly what's we know exactly what's happening there. And we also know the history associated with the attainment or non-attainment of those goals as well. So that's kind of the nickel tour there. But as you can see, this is very much lined up around 100% on helping frontline managers and reps, measure and manage and improve ultimately the performance of the quantity and the quality of their selling behavior.
I love all of that, Pete. And I, again, love the closed loop, right? And I think it's so important to give the frontline reps the opportunity to see what leaders are seeing, number one. And number two, to your point, it's mind-boggling sometimes when we throw a bunch of data at folks and then expect them to do stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like when we talk about KPIs and metrics, the way we talk about it, the way I talk about with folks is KPIs and metrics are two different things. So your KPIs are three: one lagging, which is revenue, and two leading. Everything else is a metric. And those might change at the end of the day, but you can't show somebody a quote unquote dashboard with all 20 Salesforce widgets filled out because that's a report. So I love simple, easy, consumable, take action. So yeah, I think this is really impactful. So question for you, when you're working with your clients, because it's aligning the leaders and helping the leaders to have effective, important conversations. because sometimes leaders don't know how to address a performance gap in some way, shape, fashion, or form, right?
Yeah,
So talk a little bit
totally.
about how this is helping that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, what we generally find is that there's a couple of reasons why frontline managers struggle when it comes to driving performance. One, they have a tendency, and this becomes less and less the case as you get to second line and third line leaders. But
Yes.
frontline leaders have recently been sellers.
Yep.
Whether it's the last few years, or maybe a little bit longer than that, and so they have a tendency to spend most of their time on deals, which is actually a good thing, right? Like you do want your managers on calls with your reps. It's where like live instrumentation, and then also immediate coaching can kind of happen after the call versus like, hey, 2 weeks later when we do call review or whatever. Also, managers can kind of help reps like from stepping in it in a call and kind of like accidentally kicking things sideways. But what that means is that they have to use metrics in order to understand what's happening mid funnel, up funnel, activity, hygiene, et cetera, for the reasons why we've discussed. A lot of the times managers are kind of struggle with interpreting that unless you keep it simple, keep it like aligned, et cetera. And so that kind of like unavailability, and also kind of like
Right.
lack of like intimacy, if you will, with that drives a hesitancy to kind of to hold reps accountable. Because like if you don't have something backing you up, like if you don't have a clear understanding of okay, like I think this person isn't doing their prospecting, but like it's really more of a vibe, and you don't have the capability of saying, oh, okay, well, like actually, to our example earlier, I know exactly that this guy is not doing his prospecting here. Well, now I don't feel like just kind of the a meanie showing up and saying like, hey, let's talk about this. It's like, no, I literally have seen this right here. Let's talk about why that's not the case, and like and have that conversation. And so what this does is that by simplifying it, and to your kind of comment earlier about like we have our key performance indicators, which might be like 2 3 4 like kind of things. By being aligned on that and saying these are the things that you're going to be measured on here, and then we're going to come back to those on a recurring basis in our one-on-ones and what have you. Everyone is aware of how they're being how they're being measured. And then what's important there is like it actually changes behavior, because like it was funny, my wife and I chaperoned a field trip for my 7-year-old yesterday in his class. And so we both were texting back and forth this morning about, we were comparing who got the most steps yesterday, right? Because she has a Fitbit and I have a Whoop. And of course, like, steps is a great example of like a fairly simplified metric that you can, that, it's not, the end all be all of activity, but it's something that you can align on, say like, hey, here's this right here. And another example, I think folks are, more and more fans of like I have a Whoop. I think other folks oftentimes have Oura rings, and what those have done is they've done a very good job of simplifying the what could otherwise be way too many metrics. So it's just like, hey man, how active were you? How did you sleep? Right? Things like that. And so like, from a personal standpoint, what I've done since becoming a Whoop customer a couple of years ago is like, one, I walk a lot more, and then the other thing too is I end up drinking a lot less, because it characterized to me the negative impacts of alcohol on my sleep. And then what was important there is like Whoop simplified this otherwise like massive metrics to be like, how active were you? How did you sleep, et cetera. And so I would see, man, you slept like, dog do last night. And then you connect together like, oh, that's because I had like, 3 glasses of wine, at that business dinner. Maybe next time I'll have one. Right. And so that's a changing of behavior based on availability of a very simple metric, which was like, man, you slept like, crap last night. Similarly, what we want is we want our reps changing behavior when they're aware of the fact like, hey man, like you're not here, right? And like, on a Tuesday that you're not there, and that come next Monday, you're going to be talking about that with your manager, right? And so what that does is that then changes your behavior on Wednesday and
Right.
Thursday and Friday,
Correct.
right? Such
Correct.
that
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
such that when you go and have that meeting on Monday, you know, you've remediated the issue versus like being surprised and like, you know, objection handling the whole one-on-one.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I love the fact that you're talking about all of this all together, Pete. So I too have chaperoned my children's field trips and
I bet you
fully
have.
bananas. And yes, now, you know, one is in high school and one is going, you know, 8th grade in high school. And yeah, they don't actually allow parent chaperones anymore, which is probably a good thing. But yes, that would actually make you drink copious amounts of alcohol to like de-stimulate yourself.
And then your Oura ring yells at you the next morning and you go, oh man, I need to change my behavior.
100%. And I think that's the other thing is like alcohol is so horrible for your system. You know what I mean? But it's like, okay, one glass of wine is anyway. But to your point, it's connecting the dots for people at the end of the day. And sometimes we don't do a good job of that. And again, we would all fail kindergarten, right? Because we overcomplicate
Yeah, you
it.
see it, amplify it. Yeah.
So the other question I have for you though, too, is, you know, one of the things we talk with leaders about is know who's at your table. Meaning, as a leader, it's my responsibility to drive the conversation. I also need to understand the person sitting across the table from me.
Sure.
So, how have you seen, or like what feedback have you heard from people that from a frontline manager that maybe is a new manager, move from an IC to, okay, this has really made it simple for me,
Yeah.
right? To connect the
Yeah.
dots, to keep it simple, to have the right conversation.
Yeah. So I was talking with one of my colleagues about this earlier, which is, you know, the notion between, like connecting how am I going to measure a thing
Correct.
to the behavior that you're trying to drive,
Yep.
right? Can sometimes be challenging. And then what ends up happening is like when you're a sales leader or enablement leader, an operations leader who's like been around the block like you and I have, eventually like you start getting it over like you've seen it enough times. But if you have a 26-year-old, a 28-year-old, or a 30-year-old manager or whatever, sometimes they don't know what those kind of linkages look like. So as an example there, like AE self-source pipeline is good. Like people would never like argue like, oh no, that's like not a good thing, right? So but then you might say, okay, well, like how would I know that is happening, and then what are the things that would drive that, right? And so decomposing that into, oh, okay, well, like, do you have target accounts? Are you
Mm-hmm.
engaging them? How frequently are you engaging them? Are you multi-threading within them versus just touching one contact within it? Oh, okay, got it. So those would be behaviors, right, that are measurable, that if done appropriately at these levels would then lead to this thing right here. And so if you, so one, and this is why like usually when Atrium gets deployed, there's a process whereby sales leadership, revenue operations leadership, and enablement leadership align to essentially decode what we just with our customer success function, decode exactly like, hey, what are the things that matter to you? And then, okay, well, here are some suggested, trios or quartets of metrics that then would measure that AE self-prospecting or activity or like cross sell of the new product that like we acquired recently or whatever the initiative is. And so now that is then encoded as those metrics, right, as those goals, that makes it very simple for the manager to say, oh, right, well, like I know that these behaviors right here are the leading indicators to that self-sourced pipeline right here, or sorry, self-sourced opportunities, which then drives this pipeline, right? And so by versus it being like, oh, like this massive kind of like, things to decode, it's now been simplified. And then the synthesis of that to say, hey, this rep, and like this rep doesn't have an example of this, but like imagine a scenario wherein a rep has problematic pipeline advancement, and also they have problematic pipeline advancement, problematic pipeline inflow, and problematic self-prospecting behavior. So like, oh, see how this is all linked together? See how this is all linked together? So like this then synthesizes that for those folks. So anyway, in short, what ends up happening is these junior managers can get trained by this thing. He says, hey, did you notice that this rep right here, as another example, this rep right here is light on their calling behavior because we set a goal. This is an SDR, maybe an SDR thing. We set a goal on calls, but you know what? They email a lot and they touch a lot of accounts. So they do not have an activity issue. They have a call hesitancy issue there. And so then when that is then synthesized for that manager and presented to them like, oh, I do see that pattern. That makes a hell of a lot of sense. And then the next time they see that pattern, they're like, oh, I've seen this one before.
Exactly.
We need to get on we need to do some mock calling. And by some, I mean all day, you and me, conference room, Red Bull, let's go. Right.
I love that. And, there's the phrase of correlation doesn't always equal causation. And I vehemently disagree with that on so many levels for so many reasons. So I love exactly everything you're saying, because this is exactly a lot of the stuff that we talk about. And when we do our coaching is how, right? Just really focusing on the how and talking about behavior change, because that's what we're after. Activity, right? And actions and behavior and all that good stuff. So I'm a huge fan of your platform. I think it's amazing. I think a lot of people like to self-coach, but also, again, when we go back to like knowing who's at your table is, do you have somebody sitting across from you that likes to figure stuff out on their own? Do you have somebody that needs to be questions? Do you have somebody that needs to be told? Like, I think this is such a great platform, Pete, and your history and what you've done speaks volumes, right? And I think this is something that, quite frankly, a lot of people need at the end of the day. So thanks for taking the time to show it to us. Yeah. And so again, where should people look for you? Where should they find you?
I mean, if you want to find me, I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn and Twitter and what have you. Most of the organizations that we end up working with Atrium are probably in the 20, 40, 50, 100 rep, 200 rep kind of realms. We do work with some organizations that are more in the 500 to 1,000 rep realms, but essentially anytime if you're an organization that has a need to enhance performance management, that's where organizations are, that's where we can help out. So if that's you, feel free to request a discovery meeting and a demo on our website, and otherwise I'll see folks online.
Wonderful. Thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. Make sure you're all visiting Atrium's website, and we'll post all of that in our follow-up on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody, and make it a good one.